Hey everyone, this is Ashley Lateki Ellenboss with Skyhouse Herb School and Apothecary. And today I'll be talking about dandelions, love, and detoxification. So while it might seem that these topics are very disparate and not connected, they actually are very connected. And I'm really excited to explore this idea with you. This time of year here in Minnesota and probably across most of the northern hemisphere, we're experiencing spring. And so with spring comes all sorts of little blooms and blossoms and the budding little cute green leaves on the trees, and also the emergence of dandelion. And dandelions, while we often think about them as a pest or a four-letter word we herbalists don't like to use, which is weed, weed is just simply a plant that is misunderstood. So, they are herbs. Dandelions are herbs. They're not weeds, for at least from our perspective. um, but dandelions are coming up all over the place now. You'll start to see their basal rosette, which is how their leaves are organized. They have one single taproot that grounds it into the earth. And then from that root, from that base of the root, you'll see the leaves sort of come around in uh, this beautiful organized ring or rosette. The leaves are sharply toothed around the edges. That's how it gets its name, dent de lion, the tooth of the lion. And the jagged edges of the leaves kind of look like lion's teeth. This plant also is in the Asteraceae family. So when you look closely at the flower, you'll see that it's not just one flower, but each individual petal is actually an individual flower. So when you're looking at a dandelion flower, you actually are looking at hundreds of individual flowers that each contain a seed. And that's why when it goes into its seed stage, which is that beautiful orb that we're very familiar with, the little wishies that we can blow into the wind, each one of those seeds is evidence of a single flower. So that's what we are seeing when we see the dandelion flower. So you'll never look at a dandelion the same again. You'll be like, wow, those are hundreds of flowers. How intelligent this plant is. What a broad range or a broad reach this plant will have with that many seeds to proliferate and spread. And it really is an incredible plant in terms of its ability to adapt and grow just about anywhere. I think it's found on all seven major continents. You can find dandelion, um, Taraxacum officinalis, or at least some other variety of Taraxacum. So in the book, Weeds, it's called Weeds in the Heart by Nathaniel Hughes and Fiona Owen. The first line that they use to talk about dandelions is they say, dandelions are not polite. And I thought that was a really great opening statement because if you think about the dandelion plant, it doesn't, if you try to keep it out of anywhere, it doesn't like to follow instructions. It kind of just is like, I'm going to go wherever I want to grow. Oh, you put up a little barrier. I'm just going to hop over it. Or you sprayed the lawn. Well, you missed this spot. So I'm going to come right here. So they have this kind of personality of being very tenacious and not very polite. And what's really interesting about this, if we dig into it a little bit more, is that often politeness can actually cause different types of repression. And, if we're always trying to soothe other people's emotions or feelings, if we're always trying to look, like we're all put together nicely and that we can just roll with anything and we actually repress the way that we're feeling about something, it can be very damaging, not only to ourselves, but eventually it can be very damaging to those around us. So, this idea that we have to be mindful of politeness and make sure that it's not being used as a mask to push down or kind of stomp our feelings deeper down into our psyches and into our bodies is something that dandelion can actually help us to weed out, if we want to use that word. I think in a very nice way we can, unroot and take out these tendencies we might have to gloss things over or try to make things look nice and pretty when that's not actually the way we're feeling down deep inside. These repressed feelings can actually create deep reservoirs of anger inside of us. And so, you can think about like a kettle, right? You put the kettle on the stove, you put the water inside, and then you put the fire underneath. So that fire and that heat is going to create a pressure that's going to build. And so, if it's in a kettle and you've got that little stopper down, when it reaches that point where the pressure has gotten, it's reached its maximum capacity, you're going to hear the whistle. And that whistle it's a it's a sound to help notify you that something has changed, that you've reached sort of a maximum capacity. And I think a lot of us, we override that whistle. Things are brewing inside, they're starting to build pressure, and we might get a headache. We might notice that we're having difficulty sleeping. We might notice our digestion is starting to get off track. And instead of actually paying attention to what, is there a pressure that's building up inside of me? And this is a little bit of like a canary in the coal mine type of symptomatic clue. Instead, we can often ignore it and, further repress those things. And, eventually what will happen in the tea kettle example is that the water will all dry up and then the pot will burn. And, that's not good. That can set off a smoke alarm. It can light the house on fire. It will definitely damage the pot. And if your body is the pot, that's especially harmful. And the image of the flame, I think, is an important one here because anger and fire and heat and inflammation are all very much connected. And dandelion as a medicine is a bitter cooling remedy that helps our body process and remove that excessive heat and inflammation, and specifically as a liver remedy can help quell and quiet some of the raging that we can sometimes feel, and help us process and move out some of those thoughts and feelings in a constructive way. Because we all know that you can have an idea and there may be 10 different ways to say it. Five of those will be very harmful and hurtful, and five of them will be, kind and kind, and then maybe two of those will be kind and direct and helpful. So, getting clear about how do we express that in a kind and clear and thoughtful way. That's part of the medicine of what dandelion can help us do. So in traditional Chinese medicine, they relate the different organ systems to different emotions, and also they have different relationships with other organ systems. So in Chinese medicine, the liver is associated with anger as an emotion. It's also seen as the orchestrator of the flow of qi, or the flow of energy and directive qualities in the body. And so, in the relationship of the liver to the other organs, specifically, the liver is seen as the mother of the heart. And so this is really interesting because, if you think about if there's been a lot of repressed anger, and it starts to damage the liver, often what follows the deep, you know, angst and pain of unexpressed anger is sadness, loneliness, depression, sometimes anxiety. But it's because of feeling like you can't access something. And in this relationship of mother and child, for those of you who are parents out there, if your child is hurting, then you're going to feel that pain too. So if the liver is the mother of the heart, and the liver is experiencing, or I should say, and the heart is experiencing some sadness or some grief. If your child is sad, you get sad too. It affects you. And so the relationship between, parent and child, they're very bonded. And in the same way, when a parent is really angry, It will instill fear and sadness in the child. The child won't feel like they have a safe place if there's a lot of anger and rage in the parent. And so, if we want the heart and we want the liver to be in harmony, we have to figure out, how do we express love and how do we express anger in a way that is helpful and is harmonizing for these two organs. Um, and, to me, I just think of dandelion as such a good remedy for this, because it's gentle in some ways, but it gets to the heart of the matter. Because if you're feeling disconnected from your child, or if you're feeling disconnected from your heart, if you feel like you can't get into your heart, you might have to work on the liver. And so we can use something like dandelion just to gently cool the liver, to help the liver process and detoxify the body, and to just sort of let that steam off. If we go back to that kettle example, if we let the steam come off, and then things can kind of settle back down, the heart will feel like it's in a more settled and safe state. So dandelion medicine is really a dredging plant. It has this deep single taproot, and it pulls up nutrients from deep down in the soil. And that's why it can grow in the cracks of pavement and sidewalks and in the cities, because it's very effective at getting down to the root of the problem, and accessing the nutrients that are found often many layers below in the soil. And so when we take dandelion as a medicine, we also can get down to the root of things. We can figure out, we can often start to access what's at the root of all of this anger, or what's at the root of all of this. Maybe if it's just physical inflammation. Why am I so inflamed? Why do I have high blood pressure? Why do I have these symptoms? Dandelion can often sometimes not only help to clear that superficial heat, but help us to actually access deeper what's going on, what's at the root of this. And as I mentioned before, the liver is really in charge of smooth chi, or energy flow through the body. And they often speak of the liver as being the general of the army. And so if we think about the liver as being the general of the army, a good general is able to look out at all of their soldiers, to assess the full scope of the situation, and then to put forth a command, right? They'll say, okay, this battalion, you're going to go here, right? These troops will go here. They'll be able to orchestrate a lot of different activities, all for us, the same united goal. And so when a person's liver chi, or liver energy, is in a good state, they're able to not only see the big picture of where their life is and where they're going, but they're also able to put things into motion and put things into action. Uh, the liver also rules eyesight. So if you have poor eyesight or issue with your eyes, that can be related to the liver, because again, as the general, being able to actually see everything that's happening and assess and express exactly, very clearly, what the jobs are that need to be done. That is part of what its role is in the body. So if we want to have peace, which is really what's at the end of all wars, is this desire for harmony, peace, understanding, love, all of these heart-based qualities, we have to have a good general who's running the show. And so in the springtime, especially, it's a really good time to fortify the general, and to give the general like a spa day. Go on vacation, general. Let's pamper you. Let's remove some stress. Let's give you some really good foods that are clean and easy to digest. Let's take out alcohol and sugars and all the things that can really overtax your adrenals and your pancreas. Right? Let's clean up the battlefield. Let's clean up the state. Let's, get everything organized and laid out, so then you can do the work that's ahead of you. And so taking something like dandelion in the springtime can be a really great way of hitting that reset button for the general, so that they can do their job. Now, You might be asking, how do I take dandelion? And there's a lot of different options. If you're lucky enough to have some unsprayed areas where you can harvest from, I would recommend digging up the whole plant, the flower, the stem, the roots, and the leaves all together. And you can make a medicine out of that. You can do a few things with a full plant. You can tincture it, which means you can put it in a blend of alcohol and water. And I might just do a 50-50 blend, 50% alcohol, 50% water. You can also use brandy or vodka, which is about 40% alcohol. That should work fine too. And you just chop up the plant. You fill it in a jar. So you want to, you probably have to gather at least like, maybe like 10 or so to get them into a small pint jar. Cram those herbs in. Try to get as many herbs into the jar and fill the jar as high as you can, because you want to have as little open space as possible. And then you'll take your brandy, which is my preference over vodka, and you pour that over it until it covers it. And you want to have a little bit of extra alcohol at the top so that there's no plant material sticking out. You cap it, you label it, because trust me, you might forget what that was. You label it with the date that you tinctured it, what the plant is, anything else that you think is relevant, like maybe whatever sign the moon was in, or if it was a full moon. And then you put it aside and let it steep for a full month. And then it'll be ready, in 28 days or a full lunar cycle. You can also make a vinegar out of the full plant. So you want to obviously wash the plant and wash the roots for either of these. And for a vinegar, you would do the same process, only you would use apple cider vinegar, or you could do something like a salad dressing and use like a balsamic vinegar. But apple cider is probably the best for medicinal purposes. So you would just steep that, and it actually extracts a little faster. So I'll often use my vinegars after 2 weeks. So you can try that as well. Other options are just eating the plant if you want something faster. So if you can find some dandelion greens, just chop them up, add them into a salad. You can also saute them with a little bit of garlic and olive oil and, eat them just as like a side dish. You can fritter up the flower heads. I've never done that before. I'm not really a frittering frying person, but I know a lot of people that, especially in the South, that love to fry their dandelion heads. So you could give that a try. Maybe you have an air fryer you could use. And then the root is also edible. So you can add the root to stir fries, soups. It'd be really nice recipe idea would be to make like a mushroom broth with a bunch of different types of mushrooms, and then add in some sliced dandelion root into that broth with onions and garlic and carrots and celery, right? And then you could have that as like a spring tonic soup. So those are just some ideas of ways that you can utilize this medicine. And one thing I do want to say is that it's helpful to not think of our bodies as toxic. I think that's kind of an old puritanical idea, is that our body's toxic and so we need to purge and we need to cleanse it. I think that can actually be kind of damaging for the body. So I would rather think about using the word detox, not just as we need to strip down something that's dirty, but rather than we need to remove the obstacles that are preventing us from having a really high quality level of health. And so when you take a spring tonic like dandelion and you really start to fortify the liver, and you start, your body starts to get rid of excess stuff, you might naturally notice that things and habits that you've had, or issues that you haven't gotten to the root of, those things start to come up and they start to resolve naturally. And that's the one of the great benefits of taking plant medicines singly, is you get to work with just that medicine. And a lot of these medicines will start to uncover things for you. They'll start to uncover patterns and routines, addictions that you have. And dandelion, because it's cooling and bitter and calming on the liver, if you tend to be driven into addictive patterns because of anger or frustration, more kind of heat-based emotions, you might find that when you take dandelion and it cools that pattern, that you're not as likely to reach for the alcohol or the cigarette or the chocolate or whatever that thing is. You might notice that you're a little more self-satisfied. And that's really what we're going for in life, right? Is that we are self-satisfied in who we are and what we already have, and we don't need all of these things to fill gaps or to uh, detract us or distract us from what's actually going on inside. And so when we can process, digest, detoxify, cool ourselves down, think clearly, and use our energies and our creative minds to really disperse our energies and our creative forces in a very, very clear and organized way, everything starts to feel better. So I hope that was interesting and helpful. I'd love to hear your responses if you use dandelions and how you use them. If you've had any experiences using dandelion for the liver or for the heart. And yeah, anything else that you think might be helpful to share. And of course, if you like this, please, please share it with a friend, like it on the podcast you're listening to, or give it a thumbs up on YouTube. All of these things really help keep my channel going and helps me to know that I'm doing work that people are benefiting from. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a good one.